It started with a single sentence. "I'm going out tonight. I might not be back until tomorrow." She said it as she buttered her toast, as if she were telling me she had a late meeting or was stopping by the grocery store. I paused, my coffee mug halfway to my lips, and turned my gaze to her. "What?" My voice was calm. Too calm. She took a casual bite of her toast and glanced at her phone, her fingers scrolling through something, a faint smirk on her lips. Arrogant. Shameless. I said, "I'm going out tonight." She met my eyes now, bold, unchallenged. "I don't know when I'll be back. Maybe tomorrow." That maybe was what did it. That tiny, smug afterthought, thrown in as though I was supposed to be okay with this. She continued before I could respond, as if this was just some simple, rational discussion between adults. "Look, it's not about you. It's about me. I've been thinking. I got married too young. I never really got to explore. It's unfair to spend a lifetime with just one person when there's so much out there to experience. Society forces us into these rigid expectations. It's unnatural." She sighed, playing the victim. The woman who had everything, a husband who adored her, a life most people dream of, and she was standing here justifying her upcoming betrayal as some kind of personal growth journey. I set my mug down. "So, you're telling me, to my face, that you're going to sleep with another man?" She flinched, just a little, then quickly recovered, putting on an annoyed expression, like I was being overdramatic. "It's not about sex." "Cut the bullshit," I interrupted, my voice sharp. For the first time, her confidence wavered. She swallowed, then sighed. "Fine. Yes. I want to sleep with someone else. I need to. I need to know what it's like before it's too late. But listen, it doesn't change anything between us. If anything, it'll make our marriage stronger. I'll be a better wife, more passionate, more devoted to you." She actually believed what she was saying, and that's what made me realize just how far gone she was. She thought she had me figured out. She thought I would argue, maybe get upset, but eventually accept it. She had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, letting the moment stretch, letting her believe she was winning. Then I spoke. "I'd rather not." Her smirk faded. "What?" I leaned back in my chair, calm, unaffected. "I'd rather not let my wife sleep with another man." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't like that. She was expecting anger, desperation, jealousy. But instead, she got cold indifference. "You don't have a choice," she said, her voice sharper now. I just smiled. "Then neither do you." And just like that, the first crack appeared in her armor. She didn't expect resistance. She thought she held all the cards. She was about to learn the hard way. I don't play fair. She left that night, just as she had planned. But while she was gone, I got to work. I didn't drink myself into a stupor. I didn't sit in bed, crying over the woman who had thrown away everything we had. No, I planned. Step 1, destroy her safety net. Bank accounts, frozen. Every single joint account, locked. Credit cards, canceled. The ones in her name, linked to mine, declined. Savings, drained. She had forgotten that I was the one who managed our finances. The house. Legally, it belonged to me. She had no claim. Car, registered under my name. By the time she came home, she would have nothing. But I wasn't done yet. Step 2, let her think she still has control. I didn't message her. Didn't ask where she was. Didn't beg, didn't call, didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Let her have her night, because it would be her last. Sunday evening. She strolled in like she owned the place. She looked rough. Messy hair. Smudged lipstick. Dark circles under her eyes. Exhausted but smug. "Hey," she greeted casually, dropping her bag by the door. Guess I lost track of time. I didn't respond. I was at the grill, tending to a perfectly cooked ribeye steak. The smell filled the air. Rich, mouth-watering. She walked closer, her eyes drifting to the food. "Would you mind cooking one for me?" she asked, smiling slightly. I turned my head, let her see the coldness in my eyes. And then, with deliberate precision, I spoke the words that would haunt her forever. "I'd rather not." She blinked. Her face fell, and in that moment she knew she wasn't in control anymore. I was, and I was just getting started. Her smirk was gone now. Her confidence? Shaken. She stood there, staring at me, processing, trying to piece together why something felt off. "You're still mad," she finally muttered, sighing as if she were exasperated with me. I get it. You're upset, but can we talk about this like adults? I turned the steak over, ignoring her. The grill hissed, the rich scent of caramelized meat filling the air. She folded her arms. I mean, come on. Are you really going to act like a child over this? I finally looked at her, my expression unreadable. Let her squirm. What do you want me to say? I asked calmly. I don't know. Anything. Yell at me, argue, be mad. Just don't act like this. It's creepy. I took my time cutting into the steak, testing its doneness. Perfect. Then I picked up my plate, my glass of wine, and walked inside. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. She was already spiraling. I could hear her moving around the kitchen later, opening the fridge, the cabinets. Then, why are my credit cards not working? The panic in her voice was delicious. I took another sip of wine, flipping through a book as I sat in the lounge. A moment later, she stormed in, angry, confused, desperate. Did you cancel my cards? I didn't look up. You don't have cards, I said simply. She blinked. What are you talking about? Her voice cut off. I could see her mind working, the gears grinding as she realized. My savings. Where's my money? I turned the page. Gone. She stared at me. Silent. Processing. You froze my accounts? I'd rather not pay for your little adventures. Her breath hitched. Now. She was scared. You can't do that, she snapped, her voice rising. That's illegal. No, it's not. I finally set the book down and leaned back in my chair, watching her with amusement. She was unraveling. You forgot, didn't you? I mused. Before we got married, we signed a prenup. You wanted to prove you weren't after my money. Remember? Her mouth opened, closed. That contract made it very clear that in the event of infidelity, you get nothing. I smiled. Slow. Calculated. Cruel. And guess what, sweetheart? I continued, my voice dripping with mock sympathy. You just admitted to sleeping with another man. She turned pale. This isn't happening, she whispered. Oh, it's happening. Her hand shook. I could see it now. The fear creeping in. I need to call someone. Your phone plan? Canceled. It was under my name, too. My car. Also mine. Check the title. She staggered back, like I had physically struck her. You can't just take everything from me, she screamed. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. That's exactly what you try to do to me. Her chest heaved. She looked around the room, as if searching for an escape. There wasn't one. Not anymore. A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she collapsed on her knees. I made a mistake, she whispered, her voice shaking. I was stupid. I just thought I needed something different, but I see now. God, I see it now. Please don't do this. I stood, walking toward her. She looked up at me, eyes wet with tears. I love you, she choked out. Please, just give me a chance to make this right. I crouched down, tilting my head. Then I said the words she would never forget. I'd rather not. She packed her bags that night. She had no choice. No money. No home. No life. I watched from the doorway as she stood outside, lost, broken, destroyed. Where will I go? She whispered. I shrugged. Not my problem. Her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then, without another word, she turned and walked into the night. And I closed the door. For good. The divorce? Filed. Her reputation? Shattered. Her friends? Abandoned her. And me? I thrived. Dinners. Dates. Laughs. Happiness. She was just a ghost of my past, a lesson learned. Because in the end, some betrayals are unforgivable. And some people simply don't deserve forgiveness. The house was silent after she left. No more footsteps echoing down the hall. No more forced conversations at the dinner table. No more fake laughter. Just peace. And I reveled in it. The first night after she was gone, I sat on the couch with a glass of whiskey, staring at the door where she had walked out. No anger. No regret. No sadness. Just satisfaction. I won. She thought she had all the power, all the control, but she never realized she was playing chess with the wrong man. The messages started 2 days later. Her. I know you're mad, but please, let's talk. Her. I'm sorry. I messed up. I see that now. Just one conversation. Please. I read them, smirked, ignored them. 3 days later, she showed up at the house. I watched through the window as she stood on the porch, shifting her weight from foot to foot, looking lost. She knocked. I didn't answer. She knocked again, louder. I took another sip of whiskey and turned up the music. After a few minutes, I heard the frustrated sob she let out before walking away. Good. Let her feel it. Let her drown in the consequences of her own actions. By the end of the first week, the messages changed. You're really going to do this to me? I was wrong, okay? But you can't just throw me away like this. You're cruel. Heartless. I should have left you years ago. You're nothing without me. I laughed at that one. Nothing? I was thriving. While she was out there, struggling, drowning in regret, I was building something better. By the second week, the messages slowed. By the third, they stopped. She was starting to realize there was no coming back from this. Word spread fast. She had no job, no home. No one wanted anything to do with her. The same friends she thought had her back, gone. The guys she thought would welcome her with open arms, used her and tossed her aside. She was sinking, and I was watching from a distance, enjoying every second of it. A month passed. Then one night she called. I saw her name flash on my phone and almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Hello. Silence. Then, her voice. Small, broken, defeated. I have nothing, she whispered. No one, no money, no place to go. I don't know what to do. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. And what does that have to do with me? A choked sob. Please. I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish. But I'm lost. You chose this. I cut in, my voice calm, final. I gave you everything. You threw it away. That was your decision. She sniffled. I just want to come home. I paused. Let the silence stretch. Then, in a voice so cold it could have frozen hell itself, I whispered, I'd rather not. And then I hung up. That was the last time I ever heard from her. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. She left town, vanished. Nothing but a bad memory. And me? I moved on. I thrived. Better, happier, stronger. Because some betrayals are simply unforgivable, and some people aren't worth saving. After I hung up on her, I expected her to try again, to beg, to plead, to try and force her way back into my life. But she didn't. I later found out why. She had hit rock bottom. She bounced from couch to couch, relying on so-called friends who quickly got tired of her drama. The men she thought would take care of her, they used her and threw her away. She went from luxury to nothing, from being my wife to being homeless. And every time I thought about it, I felt nothing. She deserved it. The first time I went out after she was gone, I expected to feel something, sadness, regret, a sense of loss. But instead, I felt free. I laughed. I enjoyed myself. I lived. For the first time in years, I wasn't trapped. And God, it felt good. I dated. Nothing serious at first. But then, I met someone. Someone who wasn't a liar. Someone who wasn't selfish. Someone who looked at me like I was the only man in the world. And that's when I knew I had truly won. It was 1 year later when I saw her again. I was walking downtown, hand in hand with the woman I had fallen for. And then, I saw her. She was standing by a cafe window, staring inside like she was starving. She was thinner. Her hair was messy. She wore cheap clothes, nothing like the designer outfits she once bragged about. She looked ruined. Our eyes met. She froze. I didn't. I simply smiled. And then, I walked right past her. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Her number. I almost ignored it. But then I decided, let's finish this. I answered. Silence on the other end. Then, a shaky breath. You look happy today, she whispered. I said nothing. She's beautiful, she added. Still I waited. Then, her voice broke. I wish I never left you. I smiled. I wish you never did either. A pause. So, is there any chance? I exhaled slowly, letting her cling to hope for just a second. Then, I crushed it. I'd rather not. And then I hung up. For the last time. She faded from my life after that. She never called again, never tried to reach me, never even tried to apologize. Because she knew there was nothing left to say. The divorce was finalized. Her name? Erased from my life. And me? I thrived. Happier. Stronger. Free. Because some betrayals are simply unforgivable. And some people aren't worth saving. Her presence in my life was officially gone. Legally. Emotionally. Financially. But in the back of my mind, I sometimes wondered, where was she now? What was left of her? Not out of regret. Not out of longing. But because there was something satisfying about watching someone destroy themselves. And she had done that beautifully. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. She had no stable job. She was moving from place to place. She had tried dating, but it never lasted. Why? Because she was now damaged goods. She had lost everything, and no one wanted to pick up the pieces. I, on the other hand, had rebuilt. My career was better than ever. My personal life? Even better. The woman who had once been my wife? A fading memory. Because I had found someone else. A woman who didn't betray. A woman who didn't lie. A woman who knew my worth. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was truly living. One night, months later, a friend brought up my ex in conversation. You won't believe what happened to her. I raised an eyebrow. Tell me. He leaned forward, smirking. She's working at a diner. You know, one of those rundown places outside of town. She's a waitress now. I blinked. Then I laughed. She, the woman who once sneered at normal jobs, the woman who thought she was too good for anything less than luxury, now a waitress? Oh, the irony. I had to see it for myself. The next evening, I drove to the diner. I walked in, taking a seat near the back. And then, I saw her. Hair tied back. A faded, ill-fitting uniform. She was cleaning tables. She hadn't noticed me yet. I watched, fascinated, as she moved with exhaustion. She looked older, weary. Then, finally she turned. Our eyes met, and her face went completely pale. She swallowed, visibly shaking. And then, she walked toward me. You came here to gloat? She asked softly, standing beside my table. I smirked. I came to see if the rumors were true. She flinched. Her fingers tightened around the notepad she was holding. So, are you happy? I tilted my head. Should I be? She exhaled sharply, looking away. I hate this life, she admitted. I messed up, okay? I lost everything. But I've changed. I said nothing. She hesitated. I know you moved on, she whispered. But part of me hoped. Maybe I could fix things. I let the words settle. Then I leaned in slightly, voice low. You can't fix what's already dead. Her breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes. So that's it, she asked brokenly. I smiled. That's it. And then I stood up. I dropped $100 bill on the table. More than enough to cover my coffee. Keep the change, I murmured. And then I walked away. For the last time, that was the final chapter. She faded into the background of life. She was nothing more than a forgotten regret. And me? I was free, happier, stronger, unstoppable. Because in the end, some betrayals are unforgivable. And some people are meant to be left behind. Let's begin. They say life can change in the blink of an eye. I never fully understood that until the morning I stumbled across the truth. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting from the kitchen. Selena always made coffee first thing in the morning, a habit she claimed helped her feel human before tackling her hectic day. As I walked into the kitchen, there she was, standing by the counter with her phone in one hand and her coffee mug in the other. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she looked calm, almost too calm. She greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I thought, what a perfect picture of normalcy. But normalcy can be a facade. And that morning, I was about to find out just how deep her deception ran. I had no idea what I was looking for when I walked into the master bathroom later that day. It started with something simple. Tidying up, I pulled the trash can out from under the sink, intending to empty it. That's when I saw it, half hidden beneath crumpled tissues and an empty bottle of shampoo. A pregnancy test. The pink plastic cap caught my eye first. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then curiosity got the better of me. When I pulled it out, My breath hitched. There they were, two unmistakable pink lines. Positive. My chest tightened as the realization hit me. Selena hadn't told me anything about this. And for good reason. We hadn't been intimate in months. My hands trembled as I turned the test over, searching for an explanation that wouldn't come. The walls of our bathroom seemed to close in around me, the air heavy with a truth I wasn't ready to face. I spent the next few minutes standing in the bathroom, gripping the test like it might shatter if I moved too quickly. Thoughts raced through my mind, each more damning than the last. Selena wasn't careless. She was meticulous, always thinking 3 steps ahead. If she had left this test in the trash, it wasn't an accident. Was it a subtle confession? Or was she so confident in her lies that she didn't think I'd find it? I replayed the past few months in my mind, searching for signs I had missed. The late nights at work, the sudden need for space, the way she clutched her phone like it held secrets she couldn't risk me discovering. It all painted a picture I didn't want to see. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Selena had a way of turning the tables, of making me feel like the bad guy even when she was knee-deep in her own betrayal. I needed a plan, and for that, I needed evidence. As the minutes stretched on in that bathroom, I tried to shake the overwhelming urge to confront Selena right then and there. Every fiber of my being screamed for answers, demanded an explanation. But the logical part of me, the part that had learned to navigate the delicate dance of our strained relationship, knew better. Selena was clever, too clever for her own good. If I stormed out of the bathroom waving that test, she'd twist the narrative until I was left questioning my own sanity. Instead, I took a deep breath and carefully placed the test back where I'd found it. My fingers worked methodically, rearranging the tissues and trash to make it look undisturbed. My heart raced, pounding in my ears as I tried to steady myself. By the time I left the bathroom, my mind was already churning with possibilities. I walked into the kitchen, where Selena was scrolling through her phone, her face a mask of serenity. She sipped her coffee and didn't even glance up as I entered. For a brief moment, I studied her, really studied her. The way her hair fell over her shoulders, the slight furrow in her brow as she read whatever was on her screen. She looked so normal. But that was the thing about Selena. Her greatest strength was her ability to hide the chaos she left in her wake. "Morning," I said, forcing a casual tone as I grabbed a cup of coffee. My voice didn't betray the storm brewing inside me. If she noticed the slight tremor in my hand as I poured the coffee, she didn't show it. "Morning," she replied, her tone light and breezy. "You're up early?" I smiled faintly, though it felt like my face might crack under the strain. "Yeah, figured I'd get a head start on some chores." "Good for you," she said, her eyes never leaving her phone. The lie rolled off my tongue before I could stop it. Over the next few days, I became a shadow in my own home. I watched Selena more closely than ever, paying attention to the little things I had ignored for far too long. The way she always kept her phone face down on the table, as though she was hiding something. The way she seemed more distracted, her laughter a little too forced. It all started to fit into a pattern I couldn't ignore. One morning, as she got ready for work, I noticed something that made my stomach churn. Her phone, which was always within arm's reach, never left her hand, not even when she went to the bathroom. It was a small detail, but one that set my mind racing. What was she hiding? And why did it feel like she was guarding her secrets more fiercely than ever? "You've been on your phone a lot lately," I said casually as I leaned against the kitchen counter, pretending to scroll through my own notifications. "Everything okay?" She froze for a fraction of a second, her fingers hovering over the screen. Then, just as quickly, she laughed and waved me off. "Oh, it's nothing. Just work emails. You know how it is?" Her answer was smooth, almost too smooth, and that's when I knew she was lying. Later that day, after Selena left for work, I decided to take my search deeper. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but desperation had a way of erasing the lines of morality. This wasn't about paranoia. This was about survival. If I didn't figure out the truth, it would eat me alive. I started in the place where all secrets eventually surface, the trash. It felt poetic, in a way, to return to the scene of my first discovery. With gloved hands, I sifted through crumpled tissues, old receipts, and empty packaging until I found something that made my heart stop. A receipt from a high-end boutique in the next town over. The date on it was only 2 days ago, and the items listed didn't belong in our house. Luxury candles, silk lingerie, and a bottle of men's cologne. I stared at the receipt for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing to connect the dots. She didn't buy those things for me. That much was clear. So, who were they for? And why had she gone out of her way to hide them? That evening, as we sat on the couch pretending to watch some forgettable reality show, I decided to test her. I waited until she was fully engrossed in her phone, her fingers tapping away at a message I would never see. So, I began, keeping my tone light and teasing. "Who's the cologne for?" Her head snapped up so fast I thought she might get whiplash. For a moment, she just stared at me, her face a mix of confusion and panic. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice sharper than usual. I held up the receipt, letting her see it. "This. From Tuesday. I didn't realize you'd gone shopping." Her mask slipped for just a second. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened like she was about to say something. But then she recovered, laughing it off. "Oh, that? It's from my boss. His birthday's coming up, and the team pitched in for a gift. I didn't think it was a big deal, so I didn't mention it. It was a good lie. Quick, believable, and just vague enough to discourage follow-up questions. But it wasn't good enough. Not this time. The room felt too small after her explanation, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Selena had always been a quick thinker, able to spin a story that sounded plausible enough to buy her time. But as she turned her attention back to her phone, I could see her fingers moving a little too quickly, her brows furrowing as if she were typing something urgent. Was she warning someone? Covering her tracks? My chest tightened with the realization that every move she made now felt calculated. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The receipt burned a hole in my mind, a reminder of the life she was hiding from me. I thought about the cologne, the lingerie, the candles. Each item painted a picture of intimacy, one I wasn't part of. The anger simmered beneath my skin, but I forced myself to stay calm. Selena thought she could outsmart me, that her lies were impenetrable. She didn't know I was already 3 steps ahead. Over the next week, I began piecing together a timeline. I noted the nights she came home late, claiming to be stuck at the office. I paid attention to her habits, how she took extra care with her appearance on certain mornings, how her phone seemed glued to her hand more than ever. I even started tracking her mileage, a trick I picked up from an article about catching cheaters. Her car's odometer told a story that didn't match the one she was telling me. One evening, as she got ready for bed, I noticed her phone lighting up on the nightstand. She quickly grabbed it, the screen tilted away from me. "Work emails," she muttered, not even looking at me. But I caught a glimpse of the notification, a name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji. I wanted to call her out right then and there, but I bit my tongue. I couldn't afford to tip my hand too soon. Instead, I nodded, playing the role of the clueless husband. "Work keeping you busy?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She sighed, her face a picture of exhaustion. "You have no idea." While she was at work the next day, I decided it was time to dig deeper. Selena wasn't tech-savvy, and her laptop passwords were laughably predictable. Within minutes, I had access to her email. What I found there made my stomach churn. Messages from someone named Ryan filled her inbox. They weren't explicit, but the tone was unmistakable, playful, flirtatious, intimate. One subject line caught my eye. "Last night was perfect." I opened it with trembling hands, my heart racing as I read her words. "I can't stop thinking about you. Let's do it again soon." My breath hitched, and I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't paranoia. This was proof. I decided to follow her the next morning. She left the house dressed to the nines, her perfume lingering in the air long after she walked out the door. Her usual route to work took her downtown, but today, she made an unexpected detour. She parked outside a quaint cafe on the edge of town, one I'd never heard her mention before. My chest tightened as I watched her step out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement. She wasn't just grabbing coffee. She was meeting someone. I parked a block away, careful to stay out of sight. My heart pounded as I watched her walk inside. Moments later, a man arrived, tall, confident, dressed in business casual attire. He glanced around briefly before stepping inside. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was it. The moment the lies came crashing down. From my vantage point, I could see them through the cafe's front window. They sat at a small table in the corner, leaning in close as they talked and laughed. Selena's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. The sight made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my cool now wouldn't get me what I needed. I pulled out my phone and began snapping photos, capturing every damning moment. They stayed there for over an hour, sipping their lattes and sharing a pastry. When they finally left, I followed them at a safe distance. They walked to their cars, parked side by side, and lingered by his driver's side door. He reached out, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear before leaning in to kiss her cheek. She smiled at him, her eyes filled with a warmth that once belonged to me. I took another photo, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and adrenaline. That evening, Selena came home with takeout in hand, her face alight with what I now recognized as guilt masquerading as cheerfulness. "Thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, setting the bags on the table. "You've been working so hard lately." Her words felt like acid, burning away any remaining trust. But I smiled, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband. "That's thoughtful of you." "Thanks, Sel." As we ate, I watched her closely, noting every subtle tell. How her eyes darted to her phone, how her laughter felt forced. She thought she was in control, that her lies were safe. She had no idea I was holding the match that would burn her carefully constructed world to the ground. That night, as Selena slept soundly beside me, I sat at the kitchen table, the photos I had taken earlier glaring back at me from my phone. Her smile, the way she leaned into him, the casual intimacy between them, it was all there, captured in damning clarity. My anger simmered beneath the surface, but I forced myself to remain calm. Acting out of rage would only give her an excuse to twist the narrative. I needed to be smarter, colder. I opened my laptop and began creating a timeline. The late nights, the unexplained mileage on her car, the receipt from the boutique. All the pieces were finally falling into place. Each new detail felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about uncovering the full scope of her lies. I found myself scrolling through her social media accounts, searching for anything I might have missed. Her posts were as polished as ever. Pictures of us smiling at family gatherings, captions about how grateful she was for our life together. The irony made me sick. She had crafted an illusion so perfect. Even I had believed it. But now, that illusion was shattering, and I was determined to expose the truth. The following morning, Selena left for work with her usual breezy goodbye. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips brushing my skin like a ghost of affection. "Have a good day," she said, her voice light and carefree. I watched her walk out the door, her heels clicking against the pavement, and felt a surge of determination. Today would be different. Today, I would dig deeper. Once I was certain she was gone, I pulled her laptop out of its usual spot on the desk. Her passwords were laughably easy to guess. Our anniversary, her mother's birthday. Within minutes, I had access to her emails. What I found there only confirmed my suspicions. Emails from Ryan littered her inbox, their tone casual, but filled with inside jokes and shared secrets. One email in particular caught my eye. The subject line read, "Can't wait for Friday." I clicked it, my stomach churning as I read his words. "I booked the reservation for 7 p.m. Can't wait to see you." I stared at the screen, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Friday came quickly, and with it, the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I knew exactly where Selena would be at 7 p.m., and I wasn't going to let her enjoy it in peace. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes before their reservation, parking in a spot with a clear view of the entrance. My heart pounded as I watched her car pull into the lot. She stepped out wearing a sleek black dress I had never seen before, her hair perfectly styled. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This was the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Ryan arrived shortly after, his confident stride making my stomach churn. He greeted her with a hug, his hand lingering on her back just a moment too long. They walked into the restaurant together, their laughter echoing faintly in the evening air. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a deliberate, calculated betrayal. I followed them inside, keeping a safe distance as the host led them to their table. They sat near the back, tucked away in a corner where they likely thought they wouldn't be seen. I positioned myself at a table with a clear view of them, my heart pounding as I watched their interaction. She leaned in close, her hand brushing his as they spoke. His laughter filled the space, a sound that grated against my nerves. When the waiter approached their table, I saw my chance. I stood up, walking toward them with deliberate steps. Selena didn't notice me until I was standing right next to her. The color drained from her face, her eyes widening in shock. "Having a nice evening?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with steel. Ryan looked up, his confusion quickly turning to unease. Selena opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, she seemed truly powerless. The restaurant fell silent as the weight of the confrontation settled over the room. Selena tried to regain her composure, her voice trembling as she said, "It's not what it looks like." I laughed, the sound cold and bitter. "Not what it looks like? Really? So you weren't planning this romantic dinner behind my back?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze darting between Selena and me. "Look, man, maybe we should talk about this outside." "No," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "We'll talk about it right here. You don't get to sneak around with my wife and then ask for privacy." Selena's face flushed with embarrassment, her carefully constructed mask crumbling under the weight of the truth. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't," I said, my voice low and firm. "You don't get to play the victim here." After leaving the restaurant, I drove home in silence, my mind racing. Selena had tried to explain herself, but her excuses rang hollow. She claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But the emails, the lies, the months of deception, they told a different story. By the time I reached our driveway, my resolve was set. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. This was about reclaiming my life. The following morning, I woke up early, the events of the previous night replaying in my mind like a broken record. Selena was still asleep when I stepped into the kitchen, her breathing soft and steady from the bedroom. It was hard to believe someone so deceitful could look so peaceful. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitterness mirroring the anger that simmered beneath my skin. Today was the day I would gather everything I needed to ensure there was no room for Selena to twist the truth. I started by pulling out the folder I had prepared over the past week. Inside were the photos from the cafe, screenshots of her emails with Ryan, and the receipt from the boutique. Each piece of evidence felt like a victory, proof that I wasn't crazy, that the doubts and suspicions that had plagued me for months were justified. But I needed more, something that would make it impossible for her to deny what she'd done. I opened her laptop again, my fingers flying over the keys as I searched her browser history and recent files. What I found made my stomach churn. Hotel reservations under her name, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. The dates matched the nights she claimed to be working late. My chest tightened as I clicked through the confirmation emails, the details staring back at me like a cruel joke. I realized I couldn't do this alone. As much as I wanted to handle everything myself, the weight of it all was starting to feel unbearable. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me navigate the mess Selena had created. That's when I decided to call my best friend, Marcus. Marcus and I had known each other since college. He was the kind of friend who would drop everything if you needed him, and I knew I could trust him to keep this quiet. When I called, he answered on the first ring. "Hey man," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "What's going on? You sound off." I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. "Marcus, I need to talk to you. It's about Selena." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a soft sigh. "All right, where are you? I'll come over." When Marcus arrived, I felt a wave of relief. He walked into the house, his gaze immediately locking onto mine. "All right," he said, setting his keys on the counter. "What's going on?" I handed him the folder, my hands trembling as he flipped through its contents. His expression shifted from confusion to anger to disbelief as he took in the photos, the emails, and the receipts. Jesus, man, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I had no idea. Neither did I said bitterly. Not until a few weeks ago. Marcus sat down at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed in thought. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But I need to make sure she can't talk her way out of this. I want everything out in the open. With Marcus's help, I began planning the confrontation. It wasn't enough to catch Selena in a lie. I needed to ensure there was no room for manipulation or excuses. We spent hours going over the evidence, organizing it into a clear timeline that would leave no doubt about what had happened. By the time we were done, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder, his expression firm. You've got this, man. She's not going to see it coming. That evening, I sat in the living room, waiting for Selena to come home. My heart pounded as the minutes ticked by, each second bringing me closer to the moment I'd been dreading. When I heard her car pull into the driveway, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. She walked through the door, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me sitting there, the folder on the coffee table in front of me. Hey, she said cautiously. What's going on? Sit down, I said, my voice calm but firm. We need to talk. Selena hesitated, her eyes darting to the folder before she sat down. What is this? She asked, her tone defensive. I opened the folder and slid it across the table to her. This is everything, I said simply. The photos, the emails, the hotel reservations. Don't bother denying it. I already know. Her face went pale as she flipped through the contents, her hands trembling. I can explain, she began, but I cut her off. Don't, I said sharply. I've heard enough lies. I want the truth. All of it. At first, she tried to deflect, claiming it wasn't what it looked like, that I had misunderstood. But as I pressed her, her defenses began to crumble. Finally, she broke down, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to the affair. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Her words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage what little dignity she had left. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. You made your choices, I said coldly, and now you have to live with them. The days after Selena's confession were surreal. She packed a small bag that night and left without a word about where she was going. The silence in the house was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos of the confrontation. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts, and they were relentless. Friends and family started calling, some out of concern, others out of curiosity. Word traveled quickly in our social circle, though I wasn't sure how much Selena had told anyone. I kept my answers brief, unwilling to let others influence how I handled the fallout. This wasn't about public perception. It was about regaining control of my life. A few days later, I received a text from Selena. Can we talk? The simplicity of the message made my blood boil. After everything she had done, after the lies and betrayal, she thought we could just talk. I deleted the message without responding, knowing there was nothing left to say. I wasn't content to let Ryan walk away from this unscathed. He was just as culpable as Selena, and I knew he had his own life that was ripe for disruption. It didn't take long to find his wife's social media profile, a picture-perfect showcase of their suburban life. Christine, her name was, and she deserved to know the truth. I spent hours composing an email to her. I attached the photos of Selena and Ryan at the cafe, the screenshots of their emails, and the hotel reservation confirmations. The message was concise, devoid of any embellishments or malice. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it because she had a right to know. When I finally hit send, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I had done my part. Whatever came next was out of my hands. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach Ryan. A few days after sending the email, I received a message from Christine. Her words were raw, filled with shock and gratitude. She thanked me for telling her the truth and assured me she would take action. Her strength in the face of betrayal was inspiring, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't as composed. He called me the next day, his voice dripping with anger and desperation. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked. "You had no right to do that." I laughed, the sound cold and humorless. "No right? You slept with my wife, lied to your own, And, you think I don't have the right to tell the truth? Spare me, Ryan. His attempts to intimidate me fell flat. I hung up on him, knowing he was scrambling to salvage what little he had left. With Selena and Ryan out of my life, I finally had the space to focus on myself. The house, once a symbol of our crumbling marriage, became my sanctuary. I spent days cleaning, rearranging furniture, and throwing out anything that reminded me of her. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned during our relationship. My guitar, dusty from years of neglect, became a lifeline. I played for hours, losing myself in the music. I also started running again, the steady rhythm of my feet on the pavement clearing my mind in ways I hadn't experienced in years. Friends I had lost touch with began reaching out, offering their support. I accepted their invitations for coffee, dinners, and drinks, slowly rebuilding a social life that wasn't tied to Selena. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Months passed, and the pain of Selena's betrayal began to dull. It didn't disappear entirely. It left scars, faint reminders of the life I had once lived. But those scars didn't define me. They were proof of my resilience, of my ability to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. Selena tried reaching out a few more times, her messages filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I never responded. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. Ryan's life, too, had crumbled under the weight of his actions. Christine divorced him, airing their dirty laundry for all to see. He lost his job, his reputation, and the life he had built on lies. As for me, I found peace in the little things. Quiet mornings with a cup of coffee on the porch. The satisfaction of a well-cooked meal. The freedom to live life on my own terms. I wasn't the same person I had been when this all began. I was stronger, wiser, and more aware of my worth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can rebuild you, strip away the illusions, and force you to confront the truth about who you are and what you deserve. And for anyone facing the kind of pain I endured, I have only one piece of advice. Don't settle. Don't let anyone convince you that you're less than you are. Rise above it, because there's nothing more satisfying than watching the people who try to tear you down crumble under the weight of their own lies, while you rise. And rise I did. The door swung open with a loud thud, startling the serene afternoon as Amelia stormed into her parents' home. Her face was pale, streaked with tears that betrayed the storm of emotions brewing inside. Her mother, Lillian, instantly froze, her sharp instincts picking up on her daughter's distress. "Amelia, what's wrong?" Lillian asked, rushing to her side, wrapping her arms protectively around her. Amelia collapsed into her mother's embrace, her sobs shaking her small frame. She tried to speak, but the words refused to come out, only managing to choke. "Nathan, he's gone." Lillian's arms tightened around her daughter as she whispered calming reassurances. But the phrase had already sent a ripple of dread through the room. From his armchair, Malcolm, Amelia's father, put down his newspaper, his piercing gaze locked on his daughter. His brow furrowed, the air in the room thickening with unspoken questions. After a moment, Amelia pulled back, her trembling hands holding an envelope she had been clutching. She thrust it toward Malcolm with desperation. "He sent me this at work," she stammered. Malcolm took the envelope, his weathered hands steady as he opened it. His face hardened as his eyes scanned the document. "Divorce papers," he muttered under his breath. The word seemed to hang in the air, a harbinger of the chaos about to unfold. "And he served you at work?" There was no disguising the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Amelia's voice cracked. He said he needed to run errands with Caleb. But then I got this." Her voice faltered, and she wiped her face with trembling hands. "And he's accusing me of cheating." Malcolm's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. "Cheating," he repeated, his tone sharp. "Is there any truth to this, Amelia?" Amelia's face crumpled, and she shook her head vehemently. "No, I would never. Nathan is just paranoid. He thinks I'm having an affair with someone at work because I hugged a coworker after we closed the deal. It's ridiculous." The tension in the room was suffocating. Lillian guided Amelia to the couch, sitting beside her, as if her presence alone could shield her daughter from the storm. "But there's more," Malcolm interjected, his voice darker as he turned another page. He's asking for joint custody of Caleb, but he doesn't want anything to do with Charlie. He's even asking for Charlie's last name to be changed and his name removed from the birth certificate. Amelia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lillian's expression mirrored the shock, her hands clutching Amelia's as if grounding her. Why would he do that? Lillian demanded, her voice trembling with rage. Malcolm's gaze shifted to Amelia, his voice low but pointed. Amelia, is there something you're not telling us? Nathan's claiming Charlie isn't his son. The accusation struck like a thunderclap. Amelia's eyes widened in disbelief before tears streamed down her face anew. No, that's not. She faltered, her voice barely audible as she continued. There was one night years ago. I was at a party drunk. A coworker kissed me, but I stopped it. That's all. Nothing else happened. I swear. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession sinking in. Malcolm's eyes were unreadable, his lips pressed into a tight line. Without a word, he rose, leaving the room briefly. When he returned, he held a small plastic bag in his hand. Carefully, he began gathering napkins and tissues Amelia had used, sealing them with deliberate precision. Lillian's voice broke through the silence, sharp and incredulous. What are you doing, Malcolm? His reply was measured but firm. I'm contacting Nathan. I need to know what he's basing this claim on. If there's a DNA test, I want answers. Amelia's sobs grew louder, her hands trembling as she clutched her mother. You don't believe me? She cried, her voice filled with hurt. Malcolm's expression softened, but his resolve remained. I need the truth, Amelia. For everyone's sake. The house had fallen into an uneasy silence. Amelia sat on the couch, her body slumped, as though the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. Her mother sat beside her, rubbing soothing circles on her back, but it did little to ease the storm within her. Malcolm paced the living room with deliberate steps, his mind clearly racing. The plastic bag he had filled earlier was now sitting on the dining table, a glaring reminder of the situation they found themselves in. He stopped abruptly, turning to face Amelia. When did things start to fall apart with Nathan? He asked, his voice steady but demanding. It wasn't an idle question. Malcolm was probing for answers, searching for the missing pieces that could make sense of the chaos. Amelia sniffled and looked down at her trembling hands. I don't know exactly, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't always like this. When we first got married, everything was perfect. He was loving, attentive, he was my best friend. But after Caleb was born, something changed. Change how? Malcolm pressed. She hesitated, struggling to put her thoughts into words. He became distant, she said finally. He started working late, canceling plans. I thought maybe it was just the stress of being a new parent. But then he started accusing me of things, of lying, of hiding things from him. I tried to reassure him, but nothing I said ever seemed to be enough. Malcolm nodded, his expression thoughtful. Did he ever mention Charlie? Did he ever give you any reason to believe he doubted you before this? Amelia's eyes welled with fresh tears. Not until recently. He started making these offhand comments like, Charlie doesn't look like me, or you always favored him over Caleb. I thought he was just being insecure, but now, her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Lillian shot Malcolm a glare. Stop interrogating her, Malcolm. She's been through enough. I'm not interrogating, Malcolm replied sharply. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. If Nathan is accusing Amelia of infidelity and rejecting Charlie, there has to be more to it. He wouldn't just make these claims out of nowhere, wouldn't he? Lillian snapped. You don't know what's going on in his mind. For all we know, he's the one who's been unfaithful, and he's projecting it onto her. Malcolm didn't respond, but the muscles in his jaw tightened. He turned away and picked up the plastic bag again, holding it as though it contained the answers he sought. I'll make some calls tomorrow, he said finally. We'll see what Nathan has to say. Amelia's head shot up, her tear-streaked face filled with alarm. You're going to talk to him? I have to, Malcolm said simply. If we're going to fight this, we need to know exactly what we're up against. The following morning, Malcolm wasted no time. After a tense breakfast where few words were exchanged, he retreated to his office and closed the door behind him. He pulled out his phone and dialed Nathan's number, his fingers tapping impatiently on the desk as he waited for the call to connect. Nathan answered on the third ring. "Malcolm," he said, his tone flat. "I figured you'd call." Malcolm didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk, Nathan. I saw the papers you sent to Amelia." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was colder. "Then you know why I did it." "I know what you're accusing her of," Malcolm replied evenly. "But I don't understand why. What evidence do you have? Why are you so sure she's been unfaithful?" Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "Evidence? How about the fact that Charlie isn't my son? I had a DNA test done, Malcolm. There's a less than 1% chance I'm his father." Malcolm's grip on the phone tightened. "And what made you decide to get a DNA test in the first place?" "I had my suspicions," Nathan said. "Amelia's behavior. The way she always seemed to be hiding something. And then there was that night at the office party. She didn't think I knew, but I saw her with that coworker. They were too close, too familiar. It was enough to make me question everything." Malcolm's mind raced as he processed Nathan's words. He felt a surge of anger, but forced himself to stay calm. "You should have come to us, Nathan," he said quietly. "We could have worked this out as a family." "There's nothing to work out," Nathan replied coldly. "I know the truth now, and I'm done pretending. This marriage is over." The conversation with Nathan left Malcolm with more questions than answers. When he emerged from his office, his face was grim, and his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Lillian was waiting for him in the living room, her expression filled with worry. "What did he say?" she asked. Malcolm hesitated before answering. "He's convinced Charlie isn't his son. He had a DNA test done." Lillian's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in shock. "And Amelia? Does she know?" "Not yet," Malcolm admitted. "I didn't want to tell her until I had all the facts." "You think she's lying?" Lillian's voice was sharp, defensive. "I don't know what to think," Malcolm said. "But we need to get to the bottom of this. For everyone's sake." Amelia sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Her mother hovered nearby, tidying the already immaculate countertops, a nervous habit she'd picked up whenever the family was in turmoil. The air was heavy with unspoken words, the tension palpable. When Malcolm entered the room, Amelia's eyes immediately darted to his face. His grim expression told her everything she needed to know. "You talked to him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Malcolm nodded and pulled out a chair, sitting down across from her. Lillian stopped mid-swipe, her eyes darting between her husband and daughter. "What did he say?" Amelia pressed, though her voice wavered, as if she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "He had a DNA test done," Malcolm began, his tone even but heavy. "He's convinced Charlie isn't his son." Amelia's breath hitched, and her grip on the mug tightened until her knuckles turned white. "That's not true," she whispered, shaking her head. "He's lying. He has to be lying." Malcolm held her gaze, his own filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Do you know of any reason why the test would show that?" he asked carefully. Amelia's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head vehemently. "I told you everything. There's no way. Charlie is his. He has to be." Lillian stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. "Maybe the test was wrong," she suggested. "Those things aren't always accurate." Malcolm sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We'll have to get our own test done," he said. "It's the only way to be sure." "No." Amelia's voice was sharp, her fear evident. "You don't need to do that. I know the truth." "Do you?" Malcolm's voice was calm but firm, and Amelia flinched at the weight of his words. "Because if we don't clear this up, Nathan will use it against you in court. Is that what you want?" Amelia didn't answer, her silence speaking volumes. Lillian shot her husband a glare, but Malcolm didn't back down. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over Amelia's. "I'm on your side," he said softly. "But we can't fight this if we don't have the facts." The following week was a blur of tension and uncertainty. Malcolm made arrangements for the DNA test, carefully explaining the process to Amelia and reassuring her that it was just a precaution. She agreed reluctantly, her trust in her father wavering under the weight of the situation. Meanwhile, Lillian tried to keep the peace, but the strain was evident. She found herself caught between supporting her daughter and resenting her husband for his unwavering insistence on the test. Their once harmonious household was now a battleground of doubt and frustration. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the house in a warm golden glow, Amelia approached her mother in the living room. "Do you think Dad believes me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lillian hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I think he wants to believe you," she said finally. "But he's a practical man. He needs proof." Amelia nodded, though her heart ached at the thought. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Lillian's expression softened, and she reached out to take her daughter's hand. "I believe you," she said firmly. "I know you wouldn't lie to us." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, and she clung to her mother, finding solace in her unwavering support. But deep down, a seed of doubt had already taken root, threatening to unravel everything. The day of the DNA test arrived, and Amelia's anxiety was palpable. She sat in the waiting room of the clinic, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Malcolm sat beside her, his expression stoic but his presence a silent show of support. "It'll be over soon," he said quietly, though his words did little to ease her nerves. When her name was called, Amelia stood on shaky legs, casting a glance back at her father before following the technician. The process was quick and clinical, but it felt like an eternity. By the time she returned to the waiting room, her face was pale, and her hands were trembling. Malcolm rose to meet her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "We'll get through this." Amelia didn't respond, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if the test came back wrong? What if Nathan had somehow manipulated the results? The thought was almost too much to bear. As the days stretched into weeks, waiting for the test results became its own kind of torment. Amelia threw herself into her work, desperate for a distraction, but the tension at home was inescapable. Lillian and Malcolm continued to clash, their arguments growing louder and more frequent. One night, as Amelia lay awake in her childhood bedroom, listening to the muffled sounds of her parents' latest fight, she felt a wave of guilt wash over her. This wasn't just about her anymore. Her decisions, her mistakes, real or perceived, were tearing her family apart. The weight of it was suffocating. Amelia sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her phone screen. The silence in the house was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of floorboards. Her parents had gone to bed hours ago, or so she assumed, but sleep felt like an impossible luxury. Her thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind of fear, anger, and guilt. Her phone vibrated suddenly, jolting her from her spiraling thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Olivia, who had been her confidant through much of this ordeal. "Olivia. Hey, thinking of you. Let me know if you need anything." Amelia stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Amelia. Thanks. Just trying to keep it together." Olivia responded almost instantly. "Olivia, you don't have to do it alone. Let's grab coffee tomorrow." Amelia hesitated before replying. She appreciated Olivia's unwavering support, but the idea of facing anyone outside her family right now felt exhausting. Still, she typed out a quick agreement before putting her phone aside. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The DNA test results were still days away, and the uncertainty was eating her alive. Every moment felt like another opportunity for the situation to spiral further out of control. The next morning, Amelia met Olivia at their usual spot, a small coffee shop nestled on a quiet corner of town. The comforting hum of the espresso machine and the chatter of other patrons provided a welcome reprieve from the suffocating tension at home. Olivia waved her over to a table near the window, her expression one of concern. "You look like you haven't slept," she said as Amelia slid into the seat across from her. "I haven't," Amelia admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It's just everything is such a mess." Olivia leaned forward, her brow furrowing. "Do you want to talk about it?" Amelia hesitated, the words catching in her throat. She trusted Olivia, but saying it all out loud made it feel even more real. Finally, she took a deep breath and began to explain. She told Olivia about Nathan's accusations, the divorce papers, and the DNA test. As she spoke, Olivia's expression shifted from concern to shock to anger. "That's insane," Olivia said when Amelia finished. "You don't deserve this. None of it." Amelia shrugged, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup. Maybe I do, she said quietly. Maybe I should have been more careful, more aware of how things looked. Don't do that, Olivia said firmly. Don't take the blame for his paranoia. This is on him, not you. Amelia managed a weak smile, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. But deep down, the guilt still gnawed at her. Back at home, the tension between Malcolm and Lillian had reached a boiling point. The argument that had begun as a quiet disagreement over dinner the previous night had exploded into a full-blown shouting match by morning. You're treating her like a criminal, Lillian yelled, her voice shaking with anger. She's your daughter, Malcolm. How can you doubt her like this? I'm not doubting her, Malcolm shot back, his tone cold and controlled. I'm trying to protect her. If Nathan takes this to court, do you think a judge is going to take her word over a DNA test? We need to be prepared. She's already falling apart, and you're making it worse. Lillian countered. You're so focused on being prepared that you're forgetting she's a human being, not a case file. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Lillian standing there, seething. Amelia, who had been listening from the hallway, felt her heart sink. She couldn't remember a time when her parents had been this at odds with each other, and knowing that she was the cause only made it worse. That evening, as Amelia sat in her room, her thoughts racing, her phone buzzed with a call. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was Nathan's mother, Evelyn. Amelia hesitated before answering. Hello, Amelia. Evelyn's voice was soft but firm. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. No, it's fine, Amelia said, though her heart was pounding. She couldn't imagine why Evelyn was calling her now. I just wanted to say, I don't know what's going on between you and Nathan, but I don't believe for a second that you've been unfaithful, Evelyn said. Her tone was steady, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that caught Amelia off guard. Thank you, Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. I've known you for years, Evelyn continued, and I know how much you love your family. Whatever Nathan is going through, it's his issue, not yours. Don't let him make you doubt yourself. Amelia felt a lump rise in her throat, and she struggled to hold back tears. That means a lot, Evelyn. Really? Evelyn hesitated before adding, if you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me. Amelia nodded, even though Evelyn couldn't see her. I will. Thank you. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. When the DNA test results finally arrived, Malcolm sat down with Amelia in the kitchen to go over them. Lillian stood nearby, her arms crossed defensively, as if bracing herself for what was to come. Malcolm opened the envelope with deliberate care, his expression unreadable. He scanned the document silently, his brow furrowing. Well? Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Malcolm looked up, his expression a mixture of relief and confusion. It says there's a 99.9% chance that Nathan is Charlie's biological father. Amelia let out a shaky breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. I told you, she whispered, though the triumph in her voice was muted by exhaustion. Lillian's expression softened, and she placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. See? We knew the truth all along. But Malcolm wasn't celebrating. He was staring at the document, his brow furrowed. If that's the case, he said slowly, then why did Nathan's test say otherwise? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Amelia's relief was short-lived as a new wave of anxiety washed over her. The mystery of Nathan's accusations had only deepened. Malcolm sat alone in his office late into the night. The DNA results spread out on his desk like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The discrepancy between the two tests gnawed at him, a riddle he couldn't ignore. Nathan's claims had been so certain, but the results were clear. Charlie was his son. So, where had the false DNA test come from? He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. His mind replayed the conversation he'd had with Nathan, searching for anything he might have missed. The only thing that stood out was Nathan's mention of a coworker. Was it possible Nathan had acted out of jealousy, twisting facts to justify his suspicions? The thought left a bitter taste in Malcolm's mouth. If Nathan had fabricated evidence to serve his narrative, it was more than just cruel. It was a calculated attempt to destroy Amelia's life. Malcolm felt a flicker of anger burn in his chest. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to sit idly by while his family suffered. The next morning, Malcolm called Nathan. The phone rang several times before Nathan finally answered, his voice curt. "What do you want?" "I got the DNA results," Malcolm said, his tone measured. "They confirmed Charlie is your son." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was laced with skepticism. "That doesn't make sense. My test said the opposite." "Which is why I'm calling," Malcolm said. "I want to know where you got your test done. If there's a mistake, we need to figure it out." Nathan hesitated. "It was a private lab," he said finally. "I can send you the information if you really want it, but I don't see the point. The damage is done." Malcolm's grip tightened on the phone. "The damage isn't done until you admit you were wrong. Amelia deserves better than this." Nathan didn't respond, and after a moment, the line went dead. Malcolm stared at the phone, his frustration mounting. He would get to the bottom of this, even if Nathan refused to cooperate. Determined to uncover the truth, Malcolm contacted the lab Nathan had mentioned. After explaining the situation, he requested a copy of the original report and any documentation related to the test. The lab technician on the other end of the line was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't release that information without the consent of the individual who requested the test." Malcolm's frustration flared, but he kept his tone calm. "I understand, but this is a matter of great importance to my family. Isn't there anything you can do?" There was a pause before the technician replied. "If you believe there's been an error, you can file a formal complaint. We'll investigate the matter internally and notify you of any findings." It wasn't the answer Malcolm had hoped for, but it was better than nothing. He thanked the technician and hung up, his resolve hardening. If Nathan had manipulated the results, Malcolm would find out, and he would make sure his daughter's name was cleared. While Malcolm worked behind the scenes, Amelia struggled to keep her emotions in check. The relief of the DNA results had been short-lived, overshadowed by the lingering questions about Nathan's motives. Every time she thought about the false accusations, a knot of anger and betrayal tightened in her chest. One evening, as she sat on the couch scrolling through old photos on her phone, she stumbled upon a picture of her and Nathan from happier times. They were smiling, their arms wrapped around each other, with Caleb and Charlie in the background. The image felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Without thinking, she picked up her phone and dialed Nathan's number. He answered on the second ring. "What do you want, Amelia?" he asked, his voice tired. "I want to know why," she said, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this to me? To our family?" Nathan sighed. "I already told you. I had my reasons. That's not good enough." Amelia snapped. "You're accusing me of something I didn't do, and you're dragging our kids into it. Don't you care about them at all?" "Of course I care," Nathan said, his tone defensive. "That's why I'm doing this. I don't want them growing up in a broken home." Amelia laughed bitterly. "You're the one breaking it, Nathan. Not me." The line went silent for a moment before Nathan spoke again, his voice softer. "Maybe you're right," he said, "but it's too late to fix it now." Amelia's heart sank. She wanted to scream, to beg him to reconsider, but she knew it would be pointless. Nathan had made up his mind, and there was no turning back. A week later, Malcolm received a call from the lab. The technician's voice was calm, but hesitant. "Mr. Harper, we've completed our internal review of the DNA test in question." "And?" Malcolm prompted, his heart pounding. "There was indeed an error," the technician admitted. "The test results were tampered with before they were sent to the client. We're still investigating how this happened, but we believe it may have been an internal breach." Malcolm's blood ran cold. "So the results Nathan received were falsified?" "Yes, sir. We'll be issuing a formal statement to Mr. Harper and offering to redo the test free of charge." Malcolm thanked the technician and hung up, his mind racing. Someone had deliberately altered the test results, and it was clear that Nathan had been involved. But what could he do with this information? How could he prove to Nathan and to the courts that the original results had been faked? Malcolm wasted no time. Armed with the knowledge of the falsified DNA results, he immediately contacted his lawyer, Peter, a sharp and no-nonsense man who had handled high-stakes cases before. "This changes everything," Peter said after Malcolm explained. "If we can prove Nathan knowingly used falsified evidence, it'll destroy his credibility in court. Can we subpoena the lab's records?" Malcolm asked. We can try, Peter said, but it'll take time. In the meantime, you need to gather anything else that links him to the tampering. Malcolm nodded grimly. I'll handle it. His next step was to confront Nathan directly. He showed up unannounced at Nathan's new apartment, knocking hard on the door. When Nathan opened it, his expression shifted from surprise to irritation. What are you doing here? Nathan demanded. You know exactly why I'm here, Malcolm said, his voice cold. I spoke to the lab. They know the DNA results were tampered with. Nathan's face paled for a brief moment before he recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Malcolm snapped, stepping closer. You've been trying to destroy Amelia with false accusations. Do you have any idea what you've done to her? To this family? Nathan's jaw tightened. I did what I thought was right? Malcolm scoffed. You've put your children through hell because of your insecurities. This isn't about what's right. It's about your ego. Nathan didn't respond, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. Malcolm leaned in, his voice low and threatening. This isn't over. You can either come clean, or I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. While Malcolm waged his battle behind the scenes, Amelia decided she couldn't stay passive any longer. The confrontation with Nathan had left her shaken, but it also ignited a fire within her. She was done being a victim. She called her lawyer, Emma, and demanded an emergency meeting. I want to fight back, Amelia said as soon as she sat down in Emma's office. Nathan has been dragging my name through the mud, and I'm not going to let him get away with it. Emma nodded, her expression serious. We'll need evidence. Anything that proves he's been acting maliciously. Do you have access to any of his messages or emails? Amelia hesitated. No, but I know someone who might. Her mind immediately went to Evelyn, Nathan's mother. If anyone could get through to Nathan or had access to information that could help, it was her. Amelia arranged to meet Evelyn at a small diner on the outskirts of town. When she explained what she needed, Evelyn sighed heavily. I suspected something was off, Evelyn admitted. Nathan's been unstable since all this started. He told me he was protecting the boys, but I didn't understand what he meant. Do you have any idea where he got the fake test? Amelia asked. Evelyn frowned, then nodded slowly. He mentioned a friend from college who works in biotech. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, Amelia's heart raced. Do you have a name? Michael Reed, Evelyn said. But be careful, Amelia. Nathan isn't thinking clearly right now. If he finds out you're digging into this. I can handle Nathan, Amelia said firmly. Thank you, Evelyn. This means more than you know. Malcolm and Peter quickly tracked down Michael Reed. Using the information Evelyn provided, they discovered that Michael worked at a small biotech company with access to DNA testing equipment. Peter filed a subpoena for the company's records, hoping to uncover proof of Michael's involvement. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. Internal emails revealed that Nathan had contacted Michael weeks before the false DNA results were issued. The emails detailed their conversations, with Nathan explicitly requesting a test that would show what I needed to show. When Peter showed the evidence to Malcolm, he couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. We've got him, Peter said. This is enough to blow his case apart. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Nathan's lawyer looked confident as he presented the original DNA test as evidence, but Peter was ready. We have evidence to suggest that the DNA results submitted by the plaintiff were falsified, Peter announced, handing a stack of documents to the judge. These emails clearly show a conspiracy between the plaintiff and a third party to manipulate the test. Nathan's face turned red as the judge reviewed the documents. Mr. Harper, the judge said, addressing Nathan, do you have anything to say in your defense? Nathan stammered, his confidence crumbling. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing, the judge said sternly. You submitted falsified evidence to this court. That is a serious offense. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Nathan's lawyer sat down, visibly defeated. The judge ruled in Amelia's favor, dismissing Nathan's claims and awarding her full custody of Caleb and Charlie. Nathan was fined for his actions and ordered to undergo counseling before he could petition for visitation rights. As they left the courthouse, Amelia turned to Malcolm, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Dad, she said, for believing in me. I always believed in you, Malcolm said, his voice soft. I just needed to prove it to everyone else. With the court ruling behind them, Amelia began the difficult task of rebuilding her life. Her focus shifted to her children, who had been caught in the crossfire of Nathan's actions. Caleb and Charlie were her anchors, their laughter and innocence a constant reminder of what truly mattered. But the scars of the ordeal were slow to heal. Caleb, old enough to understand the tension, often asked questions that Amelia struggled to answer. "Why doesn't Daddy come around anymore?" he asked one evening, his wide eyes searching hers for a truth she wasn't ready to share. Amelia knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "Daddy made some mistakes, sweetheart," she said softly. "But he loves you very much, and he'll always be your dad." Charlie, too young to grasp the full weight of the situation, seemed blissfully unaffected. Still, Amelia knew the damage Nathan's absence could cause if left unaddressed. She resolved to find a family therapist to help them navigate the challenges ahead. While Amelia worked to restore normalcy, her parents faced their own reckoning. The tension that had simmered between Malcolm and Lillian throughout the ordeal hadn't dissipated, and it was clear that their marriage was at a crossroads. One evening, Malcolm approached Lillian in the kitchen, his expression weary. "We need to talk," he said simply. Lillian looked up from the sink, her eyes guarded. "About what?" "About us," Malcolm said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "I know I've been stubborn, and I know I've hurt you." Lillian turned off the faucet, drying her hands slowly before sitting across from him. "You weren't just stubborn, Malcolm. You treated me like I was part of the problem." Malcolm nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "I was trying to protect Amelia, but in the process, I pushed everyone else away. I'm sorry." For a long moment, Lillian said nothing, her eyes searching his. Finally, she reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I just need to know we're on the same side." Malcolm squeezed her hand, a small but hopeful smile tugging at his lips. "We are, and we'll get through this. Together." Meanwhile, Nathan's life had unraveled in ways he hadn't anticipated. Stripped of his credibility and access to his children, he found himself alone and directionless. For weeks, he avoided his family and friends, consumed by shame and regret. One day, Evelyn showed up at his apartment, her face a mixture of concern and frustration. "You can't keep hiding," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Nathan sighed, sinking onto the couch. "What's the point? I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything," Evelyn said firmly. "But if you want to fix this, you need to start taking responsibility." Nathan looked up at her, his eyes filled with self-loathing. "How do I even start?" Evelyn sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You apologize. To Amelia, to the kids, to everyone you've hurt. And you make it clear that you're willing to do the work to earn back their trust." It wasn't an easy path, but Nathan took his mother's words to heart. Over time, he began attending counseling sessions and wrote letters of apology to Amelia and the boys. It was a small step, but it was a start. Amelia's life slowly began to take shape again. She threw herself into her work, earning a promotion that gave her the financial stability she needed to provide for her children. She also started attending a support group for single parents, where she found a sense of camaraderie and understanding. It was at one of these meetings that she met James, a widowed father of two, who shared her struggles and her determination to move forward. Their connection was immediate but unhurried, both of them cautious about rushing into anything. Over time, their friendship deepened, and James became a comforting presence in Amelia's life. He adored Caleb and Charlie, treating them with the kindness and patience they needed. For the first time in years, Amelia allowed herself to hope for a future filled with happiness and love. As the months passed, Nathan requested a supervised visit with the boys. Though hesitant, Amelia agreed, wanting to give her children the opportunity to reconnect with their father. The visit was tense at first, but Nathan's genuine remorse was evident. Caleb, still wary, kept his distance, but Charlie ran to Nathan with open arms. The sight brought tears to Amelia's eyes, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that healing was possible. Malcolm and Lillian, too, worked to mend their relationship with Nathan. Though trust would take time to rebuild, they recognized the importance of supporting him in his efforts to make amends. By the time a year had passed, the family had found a semblance of peace. Amelia had moved into a new home with James and the boys, creating a fresh start for all of them. Nathan continued his counseling and had gradually rebuilt a relationship with Caleb and Charlie. Malcolm and Lillian, though forever changed by the ordeal, had rediscovered the strength of their partnership. They became regular fixtures in Amelia's new life, doting grandparents who provided unwavering support. The scars of the past remained, but they were no longer raw. Instead, they served as reminders of the resilience and love that had carried them through. As Amelia watched her children play in the backyard one sunny afternoon, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The road had been long and painful, but they had survived. And in that moment, she knew they were finally free to begin again.